Sensationalism is dead. Mainstream media is a lie. Welcome to Dismantle the Media, the podcast where we strip away the rating-driven narratives and give you the truth the media kept to themselves. Let's unpack it.
The case of Scott Peterson. Let's unpack the horror. It is a story that has, it's absolutely haunted the American consciousness for over 2 decades now. We were talking about Christmas Eve, 2002.
Right.
A pregnant woman, Laci Peterson, just absolutely beloved by her community in Modesto, California. She vanishes into thin air.
Just gone.
Her husband, a fertilizer salesman named Scott Peterson, says he went fishing that morning. And what followed was a media storm that I think really defined the 24-hour news cycle as we know it today.
Oh, absolutely.
It was unlike anything we had seen since O.J. Simpson.
It really was a watershed moment for media consumption of true crime. You have to remember the atmosphere of that time.
Yeah.
The collective memory of this case is incredibly specific.
Yeah.
Most people, if you ask them, they remember the monster. They remember the narrative of the cheating husband who killed his beautiful pregnant wife just to be free of responsibility.
You be free.
Yeah. It was presented almost from day one of the national coverage as an open and shut case of a sociopath. You had satellite trucks parked on the lawn. You had, talk show hosts dissecting his every facial twitch.
Every single blink.
It became a national soap opera.
Exactly. And that is why we are here today. The mission of this deep dive is to separate that TV movie version, the version we were all fed on the nightly news, from the cold, hard facts found in the actual court documents, and now the new appeals. We aren't here to declare innocence or guilt. That's not our job. But we are here to look at how the conviction was built. Because when you strip away the Nancy Grace headlines, things get complicated fast.
They certainly do.
We want to show the disconnect between what you think you know and what is actually in the file.
And that is the core tension we need to explore. The conviction of Scott Peterson was based almost entirely on circumstantial evidence and crucially on demeanor.
Demeanor, yeah, that's the word.
There was no DNA linking him to a murder weapon. No weapon was ever found. And get this, no cause of death was ever determined. It was a case built on character assassination and a very tight and I would say questionable timeline.
And the reason we are talking about this right now in 2026 is because of a massive catalyst. The Los Angeles Innocence Project, or LAIP, took on this case in 2024.
Right.
Now, for those who don't know, this is a prestigious organization known for exonerating the wrongfully convicted. They don't just take flyers on every letter they get from prison. They use hard science.
Exactly.
So why would they take on the most hated man in America unless there was some real smoke there?
That is the question that should make everyone pause. The LA Innocence Project's involvement suggests they see systemic failures in the investigation. Specifically, what we call tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision. Let's dig into that.
They are arguing that the narrative was constructed first and the evidence was made to fit second. When an organization with that kind of batting average steps into a domestic murder case, which is rare for them, it signals that the forensic reality might not match the story told in court.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with section 1. The media's monster versus the evidence. Because if you were watching TV in 2003, you knew Scott was guilty because he acted guilty. He was the guy who dyed his hair.
Yep. The blonde hair.
He was the guy who sold Laci's Land Rover while she was still missing.
So cold.
He was the guy who ordered porn channels on his cable package right after his wife vanished. And of course, the big one, he smiled at the wrong times.
Right. These were the pillars of the public's hatred. But let's look at the source material and deconstruct these facts. Take the porn channels, for instance.
Okay.
The media reported this as Scott celebrating his new bachelorhood. The implication was that he sat down, grabbed the remote, and explicitly ordered adult content to, celebrate his freedom.
This sounds monstrous.
It does. But the reality, according to the documents, is that it was a cable package upgrade. It wasn't that he picked up the phone and said, I need adult content now. It was part of a broader bundle added to the service to get more sports and news channels. The adult content was just bundled in. It's a detail that gets completely twisted to fit a villainous narrative.
It's the difference between a predator and a guy just clicking upgrade on a remote. It's a totally different intent.
Totally different.
And what about the car? That was a huge one. I remember people saying, who sells his missing wife's car unless he knows she's never coming back? It feels so cold.
It looks terrible, I agree. But again, the context matters. The police had seized Scott's pickup truck as evidence immediately.
Okay, so he had no car.
He didn't have a vehicle. He's a salesman. His livelihood depended on driving. So he traded in the Land Rover, which was an expensive car to maintain and fill his gas, to get a cheap used car just to get around.
Right.
It was a pragmatic financial decision. He was bleeding money on legal fees, and he needed transportation. But pragmatism looks like cold-heartedness when you're under that kind of microscope.
It's that lens of suspicion, isn't it? Everything you do looks guilty if people already think you're guilty. And then there's the hair. He dyed his hair blonde, and at first he claimed it was because of chlorine from a pool, but later admitted that wasn't true.
Yes, he eventually admitted that was a lie. He claimed he did it to avoid harassment because he was being recognized everywhere he went.
Which, I mean, that's plausible.
It is. People were spitting on him, screaming at him. He called it a disgraceful time in his life, specifically referencing the shame of his affair. It was an attempt to hide, yes, but was it an attempt to hide from murder charges or to hide from the public shaming he was enduring?
That's a really good question.
When you become a public pariah, altering your appearance can be a survival mechanism, not necessarily a confession of homicide.
This brings us to this whole concept of demeanor evidence. We heard so much about how he didn't cry enough or he looked aloof. Nancy Grace would play clips of him and literally circle his face on the screen.
This is where it gets really interesting from a psychological perspective. We place so much weight on how we think a grieving person should act.
Right, there's a script.
There is. But scientifically, human accuracy in detecting lies from behavior is about 54%.
54.
That is literally a coin toss. You are just as likely to be wrong as you are right.
Wow.
The media, led by figures like Nancy Grace, framed his lack of frantic emotion as proof of guilt. But people grieve differently. Some collapse, some dissociate and go numb, some get busy with tasks to avoid the pain.
Sure.
Scott's calm demeanor was read as sociopathy, but it could just as easily have been shock or just his personality trait. We simply cannot diagnose murder based on a lack of tears on camera.
But we can't talk about Scott Peterson without talking about the Amber Frey factor.
The bombshell.
This was the bombshell, the affair. For the public, this was the smoking gun. He told Amber he had lost his wife weeks before Laci actually disappeared.
Chilling words.
That sounds damning. I mean, it really sounds like a plan.
It proves he is a liar and a cheater. Absolutely. There's no debating that.
Yeah.
He was living a complete double life. But if we are being rigorous about the law, we have to ask, does it prove murder?
That's the legal standard.
The prosecution argued that he killed Laci to be with Amber. That was the motive, to be free. But the defense, and now the Innocence Project, they point out that Amber was likely just a fling to him.
Okay.
People have affairs every day. They lie about their marital status every day. It makes them bad partners, but it rarely makes them family annihilators.
And we have the takes. Amber Frey worked with the police to record their phone calls.
Yes.
I've listened to clips of these. He is lying to her, pretending to be in Paris when he's actually at a candlelight vigil for his missing wife. It's gross. It makes your skin crawl.
It's repellent.
But does he confess?
That is the key. In hours and hours and hours of recorded calls, while he is unaware he is being taped, Scott never confesses to harming Laci. Not once. In fact, he claims innocence. He tells Amber, quote, "I am not an evil guy." He talks about hoping Laci is found. Now, you could argue he's a master manipulator, keeping up the charade, even in private calls.
Sure, you could.
But usually in these cases, you get a slip-up. You get a moment of frustration where the mask slips.
Yeah.
Here you just get a man desperately trying to juggle a lie about his marital status while his entire world is collapsing.
So the affair makes him a bad husband, a terrible person even, but not necessarily a killer.
That's the legal distinction.
Okay, let's move to Section 2. The timeline and the missing witnesses. This is where the LA Innocence Project is really focusing their energy.
Correct. The timeline is everything in a murder trial. If the suspect is physically not present when the crime must have occurred, they cannot be guilty. It's that simple.
It's the foundation. So, okay, let's lay out the state's theory. They argue that Scott killed Laci either the night of the 23rd or the early morning of the 24th of December. He cleans up, loads her body into his truck, and leaves for the Berkeley Marina by 10:08 a.m. That 10:08 a.m. time is crucial because cell tower records place him leaving the area around then.
Right. And the linchpin of this timeline, the thing that locks it in place, is the dog.
Mackenzie.
Laci's golden retriever, Mackenzie. A neighbor named Karen Service found Mackenzie wandering the neighborhood with a muddy leash attached at 10:18 a.m.
10:18. Okay.
She put the dog back in the yard. The police and prosecution decided that because the dog was found at 10:18 a.m., Laci must have been dead by then.
Their logic is, if she had been walking the dog, she would have been with it.
Exactly. Since the dog was alone, Laci was gone. That became the point of no return.
But here is where it gets really interesting, or frankly, kind of disturbing. The LAIP petition highlights that there were witnesses, not just one, but roughly 10 people who saw Laci alive.
Alive and well.
And they saw her after Scott had left.
This is the evidence that was largely ignored. You have independent witnesses, a mail carrier, neighbors, people who knew her by sight, reporting that they saw Laci walking the dog between 10:30 a.m. and 11:30 a.m.
Wait, let's pause on that. If Scott leaves at 10:08 a.m., we know this from the cell towers, and he's on his way to the warehouse and then the marina, and a neighbor sees Laci walking the dog at 10:45 a.m.
He's miles away.
Scott physically cannot be the killer. He's gone.
Exactly. That is the alibi. If even one of those sightings is accurate, the state's entire timeline collapses.
So why didn't the jury hear this? Or if they did, why wasn't it compelling? Why did the police discount 10 people? I mean, a mail carrier, that's a trained observer. They know who lives on their route. They know faces.
The sources indicate that police ignored or even bullied these witnesses because their sightings didn't fit the 10:08 a.m. theory.
Bullied them.
Pushed back on them. Suggested they were mistaken. One witness, Tony Freitas, saw Laci walking the dog. The police basically disregarded it. Another witness, Homer Maldonado, saw her. The LAIP argues this is classic tunnel vision or confirmation bias.
Explain that a little more.
Once the police decided Scott was the guy, and they did very early on, and once they decided the dog being found at 10:18 a.m. was their anchor point, any conflicting evidence was treated as an error. They assumed the witnesses had the wrong day or the wrong person rather than assuming their theory might be wrong.
It's incredible to think about. You have a mail carrier, someone who walks that route every single day saying, I saw her. And the police are essentially saying, no, you didn't. You're wrong.
It happens more often than we'd like to admit in criminal investigation. When you have a prime suspect who looks good for the crime, like the cheating husband, you start filtering all incoming information through that lens. If it doesn't fit the narrative, it gets discarded.
It's like you're building a puzzle, but you're throwing away any piece that doesn't fit the picture you've already decided on.
That's a perfect analogy.
So if Scott didn't do it and Laci was walking the dog at 10:45 a.m., what happened to her? This leads us to Section 3, the burglary across the street. I feel like this is a detail that always gets mentioned as a footnote, but the LAP is making it a headline.
It is a massive part of the alternative theory of the crime. Directly across the street from the Peterson house, the Medina home was burglarized.
And the police said this happened on December 26th, right? 2 days after Laci went missing.
That was the official narrative. The police and prosecution insisted it happened on the 26th. Why? Because if it happened on the 26th, it's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with Laci. But the new evidence and the LAIP claims suggest it likely happened on December 24th. The Medinas left their house at 10:30 a.m. on the 24th.
10:30.
And eyewitnesses reported seeing a suspicious van and rough men at that house on the 24th.
So let's connect the dots here. If Laci is walking the dog around 10:45 a.m., as the witnesses say, and the Medinas leave at 10:30 a.m., Laci would be walking right past a burglary in progress.
That is the confrontation theory. It suggests Laci, being, a watchful neighbor or just a concerned citizen, saw these guys robbing the house across the street, and she confronts them.
And there is actual testimony, or at least a confession related to this, right? I mean, this isn't just pure speculation.
There is a very disturbing account found in the sources. An inmate, referred to as DM, claimed that one of the burglars, a man named Stephen Todd, confessed to him in prison.
Okay, a jailhouse confession.
Right. And the story was that Laci caught them red-handed. And the key quote the DM provided was that one of the men said to her, "Shut the fing dog up."
Shut the fing dog up.
Yeah.
That chills me to the bone because Mackenzie, the dog, was found wandering with the leash still on. If they grabbed Laci, the dog gets left behind.
Precisely. The theory is they abducted her to silence her. She was a witness to a felony. And this leads us to the physical evidence that was overlooked. The orange van.
Yes, the orange van. A witness saw a suspicious orange van in the neighborhood that morning.
And on December 25th, Christmas morning, a burnt-out orange van was found just a mile or so away.
A burnt-out van.
Inside that van was a mattress, and on that mattress were bloodstains.
Okay, I have to stop you. A burnt van, a bloody mattress, found the day after a pregnant woman goes missing in the same neighborhood where a burglary happened. Please tell me they tested that mattress for Laci's DNA.
You would think so. Police initially tagged it as related to the Laci Peterson case. But then, for reasons that go back to that tunnel vision,
Because it didn't fit their timeline.
they dropped the lead.
Yeah.
They decided the burglary happened on the 26th, so the van on the 25th couldn't be related.
Oh my God.
The LA Innocence Project is now demanding DNA testing on this specific mattress cloth.
Hmm.
They want to know if that blood belongs to Laci Peterson.
If that comes back as Laci's blood, I mean, that changes history.
It would exonerate Scott Peterson immediately. It would prove a third-party abduction. It's that significant.
Let's move on to Section 4. The forensics, or as our outline suggests, the lack thereof.
Yes.
Because we have this image of Scott as a brutal murderer, but let's look at the actual crime scene, the house.
The police executed 11 separate search warrants on that house and the warehouse. They used luminol, which detects trace amounts of blood that has been wiped away. They used tracking dogs, cadaver dogs.
And
And the result, no blood, no DNA, no sign of a struggle, nothing.
But I remember the news saying the house smelled like bleach, that he had scrubbed the crime scene clean.
That is the bleach myth. The media reported widely that the house reeked of bleach. But when you look at the housekeeper's testimony, she stated she used bleach-based cleaners regularly. It was just a standard cleaning product for that house.
So it always smelled a little like that.
There was no evidence of a massive cleanup or a crime scene sanitization that you would expect after a brutal murder. To dismember or kill someone without leaving a single drop of microscopic blood is, it's nearly impossible, especially in a home with pile grout and carpets and baseboards.
And then there are the cement anchors. This was a big part of the prosecution's case. He made cement anchors in his warehouse to weigh Laci's body down in the bay.
They found a pitcher in the warehouse and claimed it was the mold for these anchors. It seemed like a solid damning theory until you get to court.
What happened?
Mark Garagos, the defense attorney, did a very simple demonstration. He showed that the pitcher found in the warehouse did not match the anchors found in the boat. The size was different, the shape was different.
It wasn't the mold.
It couldn't have been. The concrete found in the warehouse was likely used for driveway repairs, which was what Scott claimed he bought it for in the first place.
It's amazing how a detail like he made anchors becomes a hard fact in the public mind, even when the physical evidence doesn't actually fit.
It's the power of narrative.
But there is one piece of scientific evidence that feels crucial here and very technical. The baby, the fetal age.
This is, it's technical, but stick with me because it is absolutely vital. It's all about the date of death for Connor, their unborn son.
Okay, lay it out.
At the trial, the prosecution's expert, Dr. DeVore, testified that Connor died on December 23rd or 24th. This fit the murder theory perfectly, that Scott killed Laci before he left for the marina.
Okay.
Dr. DeVore based this on an ultrasound and measurements of the baby's femur bone, and only the femur.
Only one bone. Okay. But science advances, right?
It does. And the LAIP petition cites a different world-renowned expert, a Dr. Jeanty. He argues that Dr. DeVore used outdated formulas from the 1980s and only measured the femur.
Right.
Dr. Jeanty used measurements of all the limbs and, applying more modern and comprehensive formulas, places the date of death around January 3rd.
January 3rd. Laci went missing December 24th.
Correct. If Connor was alive until January 3rd, that means Laci was alive until at least January 3rd.
So true.
Scott Peterson was under heavy 247 police surveillance by then. The media was camped on his lawn. He physically could not have been the one keeping her alive and then killing her 10 days later. It's impossible.
That is a massive discrepancy. We are talking about a 10-day difference that completely rules out the husband.
It raises the question, was she held somewhere? If she was abducted by burglars, was she kept alive for a period of time? It's a terrifying thought, but the science of the fetal age suggests it is a possibility that the jury didn't fully grasp.
Okay, but we have to address the elephant in the room. We just have to.
Okay.
Section 5. The bodies in the bay. This is the thing that I think prevents most people from even considering Scott's innocence. He went fishing in the San Francisco Bay, and that is exactly where the bodies washed up. That's not just a coincidence, is it?
It is. It's the strongest circumstantial evidence against him. I will be the first to say that. The prosecution argued it was a map to the burial site. He went there, he dumped them there, they washed up there, case closed.
It's a very simple, compelling story.
It is. But the defense and the LAIP have a different view on this.
Which is what?
They argue that Scott's fishing location was publicized on the news almost immediately. It wasn't the secret. The police announced, "We are searching the Berkeley Marina," because that's where Scott said he was.
So if you are the real killers, say the burglars from across the street, and you have this woman and you need to get rid of the body.
You know exactly where the police are looking. You know exactly where the husband suspect was. If you want to frame him, or if you just want to dispose of the body in a place where it will be blamed on him, you go to the Bay.
You're saying they could have used the news coverage as a guide.
It acts as a perfect cover. It's a way to ensure the body is found and immediately linked to the primary suspect.
It sounds like a movie plot, but, I mean, if the alternative is that Scott killed her, we have to explain the timeline and the complete lack of forensics.
Exactly. And there is new expert analysis regarding the condition of the bodies.
Okay.
The bodies were found near the shoreline. The prosecution argued they drifted there from Brooks Island, where Scott was fishing. But new title analysis suggests they could not have drifted from Brooks Island to the recovery location naturally. The currents wouldn't take them there.
So they were dumped somewhere else.
It implies they might have been dumped closer to the shore or in a different spot in the bay entirely.
And then there is the duct tape. This keeps coming up.
Yes. Duct tape was found on Laci's pants. It was not tested for DNA originally, or the results were inconclusive at the time. The LAIP has fought hard for this. They argue this tape could hold the DNA of the real killer.
Someone else's DNA.
If there is DNA on that tape that doesn't match Scott and doesn't match Laci, that is a game changer.
It's just chilling to think that a single piece of tape could hold the answer after all these years of debate.
It could.
Now, let's talk about the trial itself. Section 6, the trial and the juror. The atmosphere in 2004 was, it was hysterical.
It was a complete circus.
Mm-hmm.
They moved the venue from Modesto to Redwood City, but it didn't matter. The jury pool was saturated with media bias. A judge famously remarked that there was no place on Earth, perhaps, except Mars, where people hadn't heard of the Scott Peterson case.
And in that environment, can you really get a fair trial?
That is the constitutional question, isn't it? We have trial by jury, not trial by media. But when the media has already convicted the suspect, the presumption of innocence is basically eroded. Every potential juror walked in there knowing Scott was the cheater.
And then we have the specific issue of juror, #7, Rochelle Neese. She was known in the media as Strawberry Shortcake.
She became a central figure in the appeals process. It turns out she lied on her jury questionnaire.
Lied about what?
She checked no when asked if she had ever been a victim of a crime or involved in a lawsuit. But in reality, she had been involved in a domestic violence situation while she herself was pregnant. She had sought a restraining order against her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend.
Wait, she was a pregnant victim of domestic violence, and she's sitting on a jury for a man accused of killing his pregnant wife. That seems incredibly relevant.
It is highly relevant. She brought her own trauma and her own history into that jury room. And post-trial, her behavior was, well, it was unusual.
How so?
She wrote letters to Scott in prison. She referred to Connor as Little Man.
That feels very personal, not like a detached juror.
It suggests a level of fixation and personal involvement that is inappropriate. This misconduct was significant enough that it helped overturn Scott's death penalty sentence in 2020, although the murder conviction itself stuck. But it raises the fundamental question, was the jury impartial?
Or were they influenced by their own pasts and the media frenzy?
Exactly.
So bring us to today, Section 7. The current status and the LA Innocence Project. It is Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. Where do we stand right now?
The LA Innocence Project has filed massive petitions citing new evidence and Brady violations, which is a legal term for when the prosecution withholds favorable evidence from the defense.
And they've had some wins and some losses in court recently, right?
Yes. The big win was the judge granting permission to retest that duct tape found on Laci. That is happening.
Okay, so we might get an answer there.
We might. However, requests to test hundreds of other items were largely denied. But the defense is still fighting, particularly for that mattress from the burnt van.
Why is it so hard to get things retested? If the technology exists now, why not just use it to find the truth?
The courts prioritize finality. They don't want to relitigate every case from 20 years ago unless the standard for new evidence is clearly met. They argue that some of this evidence was available back then or isn't new enough to warrant another look.
But the LAIP is arguing for actual innocence.
They are. And that is the highest bar in the legal system. They aren't just saying he didn't get a fair trial. They are saying he didn't do it.
Wow.
They argue the cumulative effect of all these errors, the ignored witnesses, the burglary timeline, the fetal aging science, the police tunnel vision, It all means the jury never heard the full story. They believe the police decided Scott was guilty on day one and just bent the investigation to fit that conclusion.
It is a terrifying prospect, the idea that once the machine of the state turns on you, nothing else, no other facts matter.
It is the danger of a powerful narrative. Humans love stories. The evil husband is a story we understand. The random abduction during a burglary across the street is messy, it's scary, and it's random. It doesn't give us a clear villain to hate.
So, as we wrap up, let's just synthesize this. We have two completely separate realities here.
Yeah.
In one reality, Scott Peterson is a cold narcissist who killed his wife, dumped her in the bay, and almost got away with it. In the other reality, he is a cheating husband, a bad guy, sure, no one's debating that, who became the perfect scapegoat for a random violent abduction that happened right across the street.
And that is the tragedy. Whether he's guilty or innocent, the system failed to investigate credible alternatives because the narrative is just too strong. If he's guilty, we want to know it was proven with solid science, not just emotion and demeanor. If he is innocent, an actual killer got away with it because everyone was looking at the husband.
I want to leave the listener with this one final provocative thought. It's the thing that keeps coming back to me throughout all this research. If Laci Peterson walked her dog past 10:18 a.m., Scott Peterson is innocent. It's that simple. He was gone. 10 people say she did walk that dog. The police say she didn't. Who do you believe, third? The timeline built by the prosecution to secure a conviction, or the neighbors who saw her face?
That is the question. And I would encourage everyone, look at the source documents themselves. The links are in the show notes. Don't just take the media's word for it or our word for it. Read the witness statements. Look at the fetal age data. Decide for yourself.
This has been The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.